just want to begin by just talking through the charges against the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, which includes causing extermination, causing starvation as a method of war, and that includes the denial of humanitarian relief supplies and deliberately targeting civilians in conflict. Your response?
Well, it's just all false. We believe, as the American president said yesterday, that these allegations against Israel, this attempt to arrest our leaders, it was both an outrageous act and, frankly, a dangerous act. It's outrageous because of the false symmetry that he created between Israel's leaders and the leaders of a genocidal terrorist organization, Hamas. But beyond that, just the charges are false. There's no policy of starvation. There hasn't been a policy of trying to starve the population of Gaza or to target civilians in Gaza. I'm a member of the War Cabinet. We've never had such a policy. And instead of engaging with Israel and understanding the facts, he decided just to defame Israel. And I suppose this is an attempt to just deny us our basic right of self-defense, and it's not going to work.
Mr. Dermer, you're right. The US president did say it was outrageous, but I also want to read to you what else he said since December 2023. He said they're starting to lose international support by indiscriminate bombing that's taking place. He's talking about what Israel is doing. Secretary Blinken said the daily toll on civilians in Gaza, particularly on children, is far too high. The US president sharpened his criticism in February 2024, and he said, the Gaza response is over the top. There are a lot of innocent people who are in trouble and dying.
Yeah, well, we are in war, and in war, tragedies happen. And we've had during this war, as you know, Yalda, we've actually had a situation where we had three hostages who came out, and our forces fired on them and killed them. We've had friendly fire incidents where we've lost dozens of Israeli soldiers. That happens in war. What is the facts is that Israel has taken action that no other army fighting in urban territory has ever taken to get the civilians out of harm's way. That's not what I say. It's not what Israel says. It's what the expert on urban warfare at West Point said. It's what General David Petraeus said. He said no country has gone to greater lengths to get the civilians in an urban area out of harm's way. Those are the facts. Unfortunately, the prosecutor wasn't interested in the facts. He was interested in these libelous charges against Israel. I said to you again, I'm a member of the War Cabinet. He's basically saying that
and you're going to say that because you are a member of the War Cabinet, Mr. Dermer, but you've just talked about the equivalence with Hamas. And international lawyers are saying that international law does not compare individuals with each other. It compares each individual's conduct with their legal obligations. So the standard is not, is one side better than the other side? The standard is international law. And the prosecutor, with a panel of experts that he appointed, says it's it's not one side complying with its legal obligations. And according to the prosecutor, that isn't happening.
Well, it's just false. And he should have actually looked into the case. He was due to come to Israel in, I think, about a week. He decided not to come, not to understand how Israel's system of justice works. He does not actually have jurisdiction over Israel at all, but he decided to just defame Israel based on false charges. I'm not getting into the whole issue of the false equivalent. That's right. I think it's outrageous. I think it's outrageous to put FDR on one side and Hitler on the other and say both have committed war crimes. That's not the main point. The main point is what you said, the charges themselves. And the charges themselves are false. There has never been a policy of trying to starve the population in Gaza.
So are you saying there's no famine in Gaza right now?
No, there is not. That's exactly what I'm saying. Well, there is no famine in Gaza. There has never been, and let me finish the sentence, please. There has never been famine in Gaza. That is a false story. It is a libel. Just like we are now in the International Court of Justice being accused of genocide. There is no genocide going on.
Mr. Dermer,
and the president himself said that yesterday.
Mr. Dermer, you say it's a false narrative. Is Cindy McCain?
I didn't say it's a false. It's not what I said. If you want to quote me back from what I said 10 seconds ago, just do it accurately. I didn't say it's a false narrative. I said it's false. It is false. There is no famine.
So there's Gaza. You're saying it's false. There's no famine in Gaza. tell me why then.
Let me give you some facts. Let
me allow me to just.
You don't want to actually.
No,
be defended.
I do want to hear it, but I want to tell you
charges.
what
you
Cindy
read
McCain,
all
the executive
you can try to
director,
talk over me, but I'm going to continue to do it until you let me repeat a sentence, because you read a litany of false charges against Israel, and I'm going to respond to those false charges.
Of course, and I want you to, Mr. Derma.
You're interrupting me again. You're not
when,
allowing me to finish the sentence, and I'm going to finish 2 sentences. If you'll just be a little patient, you can ask me anything you want. We have had 500,000 tons of humanitarian assistance, including 400,000 tons of food. We've had 20,000 trucks of food going into Gaza. That is not the actions of a government that is trying to starve that population.
Mr. Derma, I'm going to ask you, you said to me a moment ago that there is no famine in Gaza. Cindy McCain,
Correct.
The executive director of the World Food Programme, joined me on this program just a few days ago and told me there is full-blown famine in northern Gaza. She said that people are dying, children are dying. She said children in Gaza are dying as skeletons. And she told me Israel is not allowing the WFP full access.
Totally false what she said. It's full-blown nonsense. You should have challenged her. You should have looked at the facts. People are not dying. They're not skeletons there. The difference between northern Gaza and southern Gaza is about 3 kilometers. I'm a father of 5 children. If there would be famine in one part of the Gaza Strip, would you not, as a mother or father, I don't know if you have a family, would you not get up and walk 2 kilometers? The whole thing is false. Unfortunately, and I had great respect for her late husband, Senator John McCain, who was a bona fide American hero. But what she said is false, and she's getting false information from people inside Gaza, probably affiliated with Hamas, who are giving her those false numbers, just like the UN got false information from Hamas. They said there were 35,000 people who were killed. They said 75% of them are women and children. All of a sudden, 2 weeks ago, I don't know if you covered it on your show, 10,000 people cannot be identified. Now the numbers have gone way down. There are false reports from the Hamas Ministry of Health that is lying to the world. They have a baseless charge and a libel against Israel about famine, genocide, apartheid, all of this nonsense. It's all false. Unfortunately, the ICC prosecutor has believed this rather than coming to Israel, doing due process, finding out the facts for himself. He's a rogue prosecutor who himself now is above the law, running around, getting into jurisdictions that he has no business getting into. I think you're going to see a very strong response from the United States, from the United States Congress, and I think it's going to come this week.
So every major humanitarian aid agency in the world that is saying they cannot get their supplies and trucks and humanitarian aid into Gaza is lying, including David Miliband, who made very similar remarks to me as Cindy McCain on my program, just a few weeks ago.
We just had 350 trucks go into Gaza yesterday at a time when Egypt is holding all the trucks on their side. So what are they talking about? We've had over 20,000 trucks. The problem in Gaza is not the trucks getting into Gaza. It's food getting distributed within Gaza because Hamas, a terror organization, is stealing it. Right now, we are flooding Gaza with humanitarian assistance, and the markets have shown that prices have dropped about 90% on basic food items in Gaza. Flour, all sorts of basic food items, 90%. Usually markets don't lie when it comes to supply and demand. If you want to, right after this interview, I will ask my staff to send you pictures in the last 48 hours of markets, bustling markets, fruits and vegetables in Gaza. There is no famine in Gaza. It is simply...
So, Mr. Derma, though, the court of opinion, the images that are coming out of Gaza, what the world is seeing is something completely different. And then we have the WFP, we have various other aid agencies saying they're not getting in, they're not allowed in, that children are dying of starvation. Ultimately, though, through this ICC arrest warrant, what we're seeing is the first leader of a democratic country to be potentially indicted by the court. I mean, that in itself is something quite shameful that's now happened. Do you think
it's right. It's shameful because it speaks.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has and the conduct that the way that this war has been waged in the last 6-7 months?
I disagree, Alta. The Jews have been singled out for about 2,000 years. The fact that the whole world will turn around the Jews and treat them differently than any other state is not a new story. It's a very old story. You have a rising tide of anti-Semitism across the world. You had people in Sydney who were chanting "Gas the Jews" 3 days after October 7th. You have people calling from the river to the sea to destroy the state of Israel. You have a Human Rights Council that passes more resolutions against the democratic state of Israel than the entire world combined. When you have countries like North Korea, Iran, Syria, you have the Houthis in Yemen committing gross violations of human rights. There's a targeting of Israel. This is not a new story. It is an old story. It is returned to a very, very ancient hatred. It is unfortunate that this is what the prosecutor has done, because he's now going to fuel the fires of anti-Semitism that you have, because people will say, wait a second, this is the International Court of Criminal Court. This is the ICC. There has to be something real in these charges. And it's not true.
Well, you know, there isn't a history of this court being questioned when it issues these sorts of arrest warrants. And you know, the prosecutor himself said in an interview just yesterday that he's been told by officials that, listen, these courts were created for Africans and thugs like Putin, not allies like Israel.
This court should be created, and it was in the wake of the Holocaust, to be like a permanent Nuremberg, to deal with the worst crimes against humanity. Unfortunately, like many other international institutions, like the UN General Assembly, which in 1975 passed a resolution that Zionism is racism and turned itself into a joke, or like the UN Human Rights Council, which nobody takes seriously anymore, the ICC is now in danger of losing any kind of credibility. To go and bring war crimes charges against the prime minister and the defense minister of Israel, a democratic state fighting against terrorism, it's not only outrageous, it's dangerous, because it's going to start with Israel. It's not going to end with Israel. It's going to come to Britain. It's going to be your soldiers. It's going to be your leaders who are going to be in the dock, and they'll try to do it in America. And I pay attention to how America responds to it, because they are not subject to the jurisdiction of the ICC. And I think you're going to see a very strong response, a bipartisan response to this outrageous decision by the ICC prosecutor. And I hope very much that the judges will wake up and will throw these charges out, will understand, hey, look at what Israel is doing, find out the facts.
And if they don't?
Arrest warrant.
And if they don't?
Then they're going to turn themselves into a kangaroo court. And they're going to have no credibility, because everyone is going to know the facts. Just like all of a sudden the UN numbers will be adjusted for the facts in Gaza. 6 months from now or a year from now, people are saying, you know what, wait a second, there was no famine in Gaza. I think there are around 32 people who have died in malnutrition. There have been 20,000 people who have died in the United States 2 years ago for malnutrition. You're talking about children that are all bones, skin and bones, and they're all dying.
Well, that's what the WFP is saying today. They're saying they're not getting trucks in. They're saying children are dying.
A senator in the United States put up 2 pictures behind him about children apparently starving in Gaza. And both of those children had pre-existing genetic conditions that were responsible and had nothing to do with famine. This is an outrageous attack on Israel. It is a libelous attack against Israel. We are fighting a terror organization that is genocidal, that murdered 1,200 Israelis, took 250 hostage, that raped our women, burned our babies. And instead of standing with a democratic country that is fighting against terror, you're standing with terrorists, this ICC prosecutor who's embedding themselves in civilian areas, mosques,
and just briefly, I mean,
it's an outrage.
The panel of experts have said the charges have nothing to do with the reason for the conflict. The charges concern waging war in a matter that violates the long-established rules of international law.
It's just not true. And the leading expert at West Point, John Spencer, said no country has ever taken such great lengths to get civilians out of harm's way. While we're talking now, there are 950,000 civilians that have left Rafah. Why? Because we dropped millions of leaflets, just like we did in other parts of Gaza, to get them out of harm's way. That's how Israel prosecutes the war. We will continue to do it and uphold the highest international standards. That is Israel's commitment as a democratic and just state. We are fighting a just war with just means. We have nothing to apologize about. The ones who should be apologizing is the ICC prosecutor. I'm very glad to see that the Prime Minister of Britain said he was deeply troubled by this decision. I hope other fair-minded people around the world will reject it. I think serious countries will not take these charges seriously.
Mr. Dermot, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.